This is the Marketing Umbrella Podcast, where it's all about getting the information you need from successful leading marketers to build and grow your digital marketing agency. Brought to you by Itamar Shafir, founder and CEO of Umbrella, the technology platform and brand that is powering thousands of marketing agencies around the country. Find him at umbrellaus.com. Now, here's your host, Kevin Pruitt.
This is Kevin Pruitt with the Marketing Umbrella Podcast. It's my pleasure to introduce our special guest today is the founder and CEO of EngineBI, and he's also a serial entrepreneur. Prior to EngineBI, he established Rise Interactive in 2004 with where he grew Rise from a one-person shop to one of the largest independent marketing agencies in the world. After selling Rise, he realized that he was most energized when connecting and helping fellow entrepreneurs grow their businesses. Ramsey Innovations is the product of that inspiration. Focusing on insights-driven finance was instrumental in Rise's success. So like at Rise, he developed a proprietary tech-enabled approach for servicing hidden financial insights that drive critical business decisions. In his spare time, what little that is, maybe in his spare time, he enjoys spending time with his wife, 3 daughters and 2 dogs. He loves soccer, played on his alma mater's team, Kenyon College, and now he coaches 2 of his daughters in the same sport. Please welcome me in joining Jon Morris to the podcast. Jon, thanks for joining us.
Kevin, really excited to be here. Thank you so much.
I've watched a couple of other interviews you've done, and it's interesting just the kind of the way that the interviewer has taken these different approaches, and you almost seem like 2 different guys on those interviews, but based on the questions. So I'm interested to see what your third personality looks like as it comes alive in the Marketing Umbrella. But what did we not mention in the intro that you think might be helpful for our listeners?
I think there's a couple things. I think one of the things that people have to understand is that there are 2 versions of yourself. And one version, 99% of all agency owners, in my opinion, started because they love marketing of some aspect and wanted to do it on their own as opposed to working for someone else.
Yeah.
And very soon that they're going to realize that there is a marketing version of themselves and there's an entrepreneur version of themselves. And they're going to have to do soul searching of which version is more important to them. I've heard some people say that I never want to go larger than 50 people because I want to be involved in all the strategy and doing all the execution. For me, I had very deep roots in digital marketing. So I was an expert in digital marketing when I started Rise, but I was much more interested in the entrepreneurial aspect of it. I wanted to take a small entity and turn it into a big entity. In my very first interview, someone asked me, what's the goal of the company? I said, to create the world's largest independent digital agency. And so from a one-person shop, I knew where I wanted to be. There's no right or wrong answer, but I think that people really have to understand who do they want to be. And because, at some point, you don't do any marketing.
Right.
You get to, determine the strategy of your business, and you have to deal with the finance department and the HR department and all the employees that you have. And so I think that's just a really important thing for people to understand as they're on that journey.
It's really interesting because it kind of brings to mind that old adage that says, if you don't know where you're going, you'll never get there, kind of approach. But, did you just wake up one day and decide, or did you have some kind of a epiphany or awareness that said, you know what, I'm actually an entrepreneur. It doesn't matter if I'm selling widgets, if I am, selling hot dogs at a Chicago Cubs game. I am driven to do business and do it well and solve problems through the marketplace. So walk us through kind of the early days of Jon Morris discovering himself.
So the early days go back to my childhood, actually. So my mom owned her own business. My dad owned his own business. My grandma owned her own business. My grandpa owned his own business.
In your DNA, it's in your bones.
And so I remember once I was talking to a friend of mine who said he wanted to be a dentist, and now he runs the oral pathology department at Harvard. And I said I wanted to own my own business one day. And he was like, doing what? And I was like, I don't know. I just want to I just want to run a company.
Yeah.
And that goes back to like all the way maybe fifth grade, so
you're probably schlepping candy bars on the playground or something.
I definitely had a lot of those little, younger entrepreneur businesses, but none of them ever succeeded.
Yeah.
But the, my biggest fear though was Rise was my second agency. My first agency failed.
Mm-hmm.
I grew it to about 10 people. And then I lost 80% of my revenue in 1 month, and I ended up having to close the doors down.
Wow.
And so I actually went to business school to study finance, and I got an internship at a hedge fund, and I was bored out of my mind. And I was interviewing CFOs and CEOs, and I was like, I want to be back on that side of the business.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a little bit lost. I was in digital marketing. I went to business school for a degree in finance. A friend of mine convinced me to enter this business plan competition. I had no interest in business after the fact. I just wanted to win the competition. And then we ended up taking second place. We won some money. And I was like, well, if all these venture capitalists and entrepreneurs believe in me, maybe I have something here.
Mm-hmm.
But I was very scared of being what I call a business of the living dead. And the business of a living dead is that you make just enough money to never make any money. And I'm willing to bet that a lot of the listeners right now, if they own an agency, know that feeling, that they're busting their butts. And for whatever reason, every year it doesn't feel like you make any money. And so I created milestones for myself in the early years. And I had to achieve certain financial goals to keep going. And once I achieve those milestones, eventually the opportunity cost was lower than what I was doing at Rise based on the success I was having. But, that was a big fear of mine.
Yeah, that very legitimate. I mean, it is interesting when I talk to guys that have and ladies that have gotten into the kind of the marketing space. It's like there's two paths. There's one path that says I was running a business in a different vertical. And I figured out I had to learn how to sell, had to market well, and kind of grew into that, by just trial and error. The other is I got a job in marketing, figured out I really liked this and I was good at it. So then I decided to go out on my own. So what path would you say, did you take to get into the marketing space initially?
So I started my first digital agency pretty much the day or 2 days after I graduated college. So I graduated in 1996. I applied to all the major consulting firms. It wasn't Accenture, Anderson Consulting, et cetera.
McKinsey, Bain,
final
all those,
interviews of pretty much every single one I applied to, and got rejected from every single major consulting firm. And so I'm 22 years old. I'm filled with ambition, and I didn't know what to do. So I created a computer company. I should do air quotes for that computer company. I knew nothing about computers. I just was nerdy enough that people thought I knew something about computers. And I started building these typical late 1990s beyond ugly websites from a guy who has no design background and no coding background. And I would walk around with HTML for dummies, like in a little suitcase, like trying to teach myself how to, code a site. And as I was meeting with my potential clients, they kept on asking me, well, once I build this website, how's anyone going to find it? And I had no clue. At that point, no one really had a clue. I mean, it was the beginning of digital marketing.
Yeah.
To just give you an idea, the first time I even heard of the internet was the spring of 1996. So although it was around before, I mean, it was not mainstream in any way, shape, or form.
Certainly wasn't ubiquitous. No, you're right.
And so I started investigating and researching all of the different ways to do digital marketing, and quickly became one of the leading experts in search engine optimization. And a lot of the major advertising agencies were outsourcing their search engine optimization to me. And, so I was dealing with Fortune 500 brands at age 23.
That's amazing.
and
That
that's
is the
kind of what
Wild
got me
West
into
early
space.
days.
Yep.
That's for sure. That is
So,
that's
so that's how I
amazing.
got into marketing. And then, what I would say is one of the biggest differences is I'm a math guy,
Mm-hmm.
and I've always been a math guy. And I took a data-driven approach to digital marketing, and which was really where a lot of digital marketing is today. But at the time, there weren't that many great places to advertise. I remember, once again, 23 years old, I am pitching Enterprise Rent-A-Car to win I was literally the first digital agency they ever hired. And the second highest person in the company, who worked, I think, 1 month a year now, and is worth $1 gazillion, for whatever reason, decided to come into that pitch. And he asked me, he's like, so how are you going to get us on AOL? And my response to him was, how else would you like me to waste your money? And I started to show him all of the different ways that the numbers just don't make sense on AOL.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And I went through the CPM, the average
Pretty bold
click-through rate.
23-year-old.
Well, you know what? I would say the boldness probably was because I was 23 years old. Like
I
my
didn't know
response
better,
would
yeah.
have been a much classier response, but he ended up loving it.
Yeah.
And, I really believe that was the line that got us to win the whole contract. But there just wasn't that many, high quality, lead gen type places at that time. So I think the second agency, Rise, did so much better because it was a very similar approach, but there were much better places to advertise. The industry evolved.
Yep. It kind of, it's like launching a product that the market's not quite ready for. It may be a great product, but it doesn't fit because there's not a big enough market. But so the lessons that you learned in your first gig that you said you pivoted from to start Rise, what was what did you have to, the Rubicon you had to come through to that said, you know what, I'm going to do this again, only I'm going to do it better. I'm going to do it. Yep. I mean, how did you kind of overcome that fear of kind of jumping back in the same pool again?
So there were three major flaws, I think, from my first business. The first one was I was petrified to fire people. And I decided that, this is another soul searching moment. You cannot be an agency owner and be scared of making tough decisions. Mm-hmm. You will not scale. You will not succeed. Yeah. And it is the worst part of the job. And I always think that what's really important for people to think about is what's the worst part of the job? Like if you think about being president of the United States, in my opinion, the worst part of the job is that you have to send bombs into someplace and kill somebody.
Yep.
I personally would never want that on my shoulders. I wouldn't want that responsibility.
Or sending your own citizens into a war zone to
exactly.
die. Yeah.
I mean, it's like that's like heavy stuff, and it's like you're impacting the livelihood when you run an agency of people you love, people you care about, people you're in the trenches with. But I came to the conclusion that was something that I was going to go into the second job, and I was honestly going to create a performance-based culture, and I'm going to look to hire the best of the best.
Yeah.
So that was one. The second one was incredibly rigorous financial acumen. So I wanted to make sure that I understood the benchmark numbers and that I made decisions based on those benchmark numbers. And so I learned what all the benchmark numbers are. I learned about, having a 50% gross margin, having 20% top line growth, having 20% bottom line growth. And so I got to know those numbers incredibly well. And
were these your own standards or were these like industry standards at that time?
These are industry standards. So like when you talk to, a lot of the people at the holding companies, you talk to people who buy companies, there's sort of numbers they're looking for on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And, the best source is literally the people who buy companies because, they have probably seen hundreds of companies and have passed or not passed on different companies. And so I surrounded myself with mentors. So my greatest mentor is a guy named Jack Kraft. by the way, he has a line which you used earlier, which is if you don't know where you're going, every road will take you there. So similar to what you said. But, he was the vice chairman and chief operating officer at Leo Burnett. And I learned a ton from him. And so, and that's one of the things I always recommend to other people is you need to surround yourself by someone who has been there and done it before and can really help guide you to grow. Don't try to do it all on your own. Like there's no point in repeating mistakes that someone can prevent you from making. But the third one was customer concentration. So I lost 80% of my revenue in 1 month, and it was 3 clients. And so what I did differently this time was anytime I won a big account, I would invest more in sales and marketing to win my next big account. And so I don't know if we ever had a client more than 15% of our revenue. But we had, by the time I left, we had, many 7-figure accounts. But because we developed that sales and marketing infrastructure, I was never beholden to one particular company.
Right. And it's more than like just diversification. It really is like you're almost doubling down, on whatever the next, you kind of have that constant funnel, that is working, that top end of the funnel. But is there a law of diminishing returns when you're doubling down like that? Is there a point that you say, you know what, my infrastructure can't keep up with, that type of growth?
No, but what you have to, like, one of my least favorite lines is I just promised the client service team that I'm not going to sell anymore because we're at capacity.
Yeah.
When I hear that, what that tells me is that you haven't invested in your recruiting infrastructure properly. So, we were able to, add 6 million plus in incremental revenue every single year because we had such a solid recruiting infrastructure. But there are a few things that I think are really important. The first is we built a culture of promoting from within, and we very rarely recruited from other agencies. So people would poach from us all the time. We never poached from them. Sometimes I wanted to, just to like get back at them for stealing my talent. But we generally would hire entry-level employees or maybe a year or two out of school and train them to be amazing digital marketers. And the benefit of doing that is that it is substantially faster to hire entry-level employees than it is to hire a mid-level digital marketer. And so we were able, our average time from a positioning opening up to getting accepted, it's not the start date, but just position open to accepted, was 19 days. And so when you are winning business at a fairly high volume, we could staff really quickly, and then they would go through a full training program to get them up to speed as fast as possible.
Have you had to adjust a little bit in that approach with kind of more the Gen Z mentality that says, you know what, I am going to job hop. I expect to job hop type thing, or are you just seeing that the culture the company culture kind of overrides, societal culture?
Look, what I would, that my mentor, Jack, used to tell me is he would hire 50 for 12. And what he would say is that he would hire 50 people right out of college, and in 2 years, 12 of them would still be with the company. And, Jack's, a generation before me. So it's, the idea of people, like, it's a high turnover industry.
Yeah.
People will job hop. Yeah. I had one person who left to become a track coach, and just change the career. And by the way, those are generally my favorite reasons that people leave. It's like when they leave because they're like, I want to go to a different industry. Like, I think that's awesome. Like they've done their own soul searching of where they want to go. But no, I mean, we promoted from within, and if someone left, that became an opportunity for someone else. And then we would go hire the next entry level person. And, and what you would find is a lot of people, the grass is always greener on the other side until you get to the other side. Some people have come back.
Yeah.
Some people regretted their decision. Some people didn't realize like how good our systems were that we had in place. Some people just found out that agency problems are agency problems. And when you go to the next agency,
Yes.
It's not any different than, your current agency.
I mean, I love that approach from a morale standpoint too, that says, you know what, people, they do, nothing boosts or bursts morale faster than to bring somebody in over a team from the outside that the team never had a chance to kind of grow into that position.
Look,
crazy.
It's funny. There is always pros and cons to every strategy.
Sure.
The pros to our promoting from within is a couple things. One, I just think it's a great cultural aspect. You know that you're going to get first opportunity for that advancement as opposed to bringing someone on the outside. The second thing is it generally takes about 6 months to find a really good mid-level person in the digital marketing world.
Yeah.
And so you can get speed to that impact of that role at a much faster place. The downside is a lot of people are getting promoted before they're ready.
Yeah.
And that does create friction for, the people who have to be managed by someone who's not totally ready to be managed. And so, whether it's a promotion strategy, a hiring with, from the outside strategy, a org structure strategy, I found that there's pros and cons to everything. And I just think the pros far outweigh the cons because yes, that person might not be ready, but if they're ready within 6 months, and it takes 6 months for me to find someone anyway, and then you got to get that person onboarded, you're in a much better position than if you choose the alternative strategy.
And if their salaries at 60% of what it would, cost you to bring somebody in from the outside. And there's always baggage that you're bringing in too, that you don't, it's not a clean slate, that you've trained, but walk us through the kind of just the back end of EngineBI. What is its specific purpose that you designed it for? What were you trying to solve for when you said, hey, we need this to happen? I mean, were you scratching your own internal itch?
You know what? So when I was at Rise, we hired a business coach that we would meet with every 3 months. And for several years, every 3 months, every time he saw our financials, he's like, I'm blown away by the insights you guys have. He's like, this is a business within itself. So that stuck with me after several years of hearing it.
Yeah.
I stepped down as the CEO on April 1st of 2020. And it is the beginning of the pandemic.
That is right at the
Airports
first of
are
COVID.
closed.
That's right.
I have 3 young kids, and I was like, what am I going to do with my time? I was like, I can't go anywhere. I can't do anything. I'm scared about, I'm literally wiping my groceries down at that moment in time. And so I decided to start this business much sooner than I thought. But I'll just give you an idea. If you are an agency owner, there are only 3 metrics that matter. And I can remove all the noise. The only metrics that matter is your cash relative to your monthly overhead. So if you have $100,000 out the door, I want you to have $200,000 in cash or more. Your profit as a percent of revenue. So I typically want you to have 20% of your revenue should be profit. And your year-over-year revenue growth. I want your year-over-year revenue growth to be 20% or greater. And so those are the 3 numbers that matter. And so what the software is designed to do is to help you make the decisions that increase those 3 metrics. And a lot of it is budgeting and forecasting. A lot of it is business intelligence. A lot of it is benchmarking. But, what I think of it is decision-making software for agencies. It is a category that doesn't really exist. Like, if you type in decision-making software providers, you're not going to find many that will come up.
And you worked on the SEO, so you're always going to be number one.
Exactly. Yep. So, so what I want people to think about is, how do they spend their time? And if they're spending their time on something that doesn't increase one of those three metrics, why are they spending their time on it? And, making really smart decisions. And the reason why I think budgeting and forecasting is so important, which is a core element of the software, is I don't believe it can be a goal unless you put budget against it.
Yep.
So if you say like, hey, I want to grow faster, my first question is, great, what % of your revenue do you spend on sales and marketing? I was like, oh, I just have word of mouth. I was like, well, then you don't really want to grow. If you want to, like, I'll give you an example. I look at my calendar. Last week, I spent 47% of my time on new business efforts. That's my personal time. I look at every single meeting. I break them up into categories. So like my leadership meeting, I put into the alignment category. I have product development categories. I put that in my product development category. So it's like I'm very focused that my time is spent where I want it to be spent. Right now, I want the majority of my time focused on new business and thought leadership. That's the core area that I'm focused on. And, but I look at the dollars and I look at the time, and that's what I want to teach agency owners how to do, is to learn how to do that.
And it's interesting because it has such a personal application, even in your own life. You can look at your own calendar. It's like, you have your own version of EngineBI running your Outlook calendar or your Google calendar, so to speak. But
it was funny. I showed this to my brother, and my brother's a very inquisitive person. I literally showed him like one screen, and I was on it for like 2 hours. He's like, well, explain, like, how do you create that number? Why is that number important? And he's just going into great detail. And after he finally understood what the software is, he's like, you should build this for people personally. Like, this thing is so powerful.
Yep.
He's like, I would love to have this for my own finances, and I was like, maybe one day, but let's figure out how to help agency owners grow faster first.
It's interesting because you answer that. That was going to be my next question was, is it just specific to the agency and marketing agency space, or does it have a broader application? Is it kind of industry agnostic at this stage?
My ultimate goal is to own the professional service space. That, I don't know enough about inventory, or if like I'm dealing with like CPG companies or all, it's just not my expertise.
Right.
But I don't really care if you're a lawyer, an architect, engineer. The fundamentals of how you sell your time, how much you sell your time, what your gross margin needs to be, what your SG&A needs to be, it's equal across the board. And so the technology is really being built for the professional service space. We are starting with agencies. And then when we get to critical mass, we'll then start going after the next market.
So as this kind of a crazy question, do you miss being out of the marketing agency space? Like directly, like not second degree, but first degree.
No. A couple of things. One, I love the fact that I still get to talk to agency owners every single day. I've been in the agency space since the mid 1990s, and now it's tangential as opposed to being in the day-to-day.
Yeah.
But what I love about what I'm doing now is I'm just someone who really enjoys learning. I'm reading every day a book or two about like how to grow a SaaS company. And so, I'm expanding my mind to learn how to run a different type of business. And I really enjoy that.
You had the idea, you did the kind of the wireframes of the idea, you did the flow chart, and you had, brainstorming sessions. From that stage to a delivery of the SaaS product, was that a difficult journey, or did it pretty well fall into place pretty quickly because you knew exactly where you wanted to go? We knew what we had to do to measure these things. What was that journey like?
I did it a little bit differently. So I have a second company, which I haven't mentioned at all, called Fiscal Advocate. Fiscal Advocate is a fractional CFO company for agencies. And what we did is we ended up winning a bunch of agencies as clients, and we built these Google Sheets on steroids. And those Google Sheets became our prototypes for the technology. Yeah. And so I actually was running a professional service company for the first few years. The software got launched in March, but I was able to actually get direct feedback of, hey, this is important. Can you do this? And can you add that? And so that allowed us to really design the vision for what we're building. And then Fiscal Advocate, I now have a leader named Nico in place who's phenomenal, and he runs the day-to-day of that operation.
As I've listened to you kind of talk about, your journey through the marketing agency space, and then we spent probably the majority of time kind of in that arena. But you mentioned, the 3 KPIs in essence that they need to keep in mind as an agency owner. But what are some others, as we're kind of wrapping up today, what are some other learnings that you took away from your own experience in the school of hard knocks, that you think would be helpful to agency owners today, especially those that may just be, getting started in the space?
So this is something I repeat regularly. There are 120,000 agencies just in the United States. And what that generally means is, I don't care who you are, what you do, what niche you focus on. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of agencies that you're competing with that do the exact same thing.
Yep.
And so what I believe that is really important and really hard, I am finding talking to a lot of agencies, is to have a unique point of view. And so there are.
So we're not talking USP, we're talking unique point of view. A little different.
Yep. So the idea is that once you define your target audience and you define the services that you're going to offer that target audience, then it is a matter of what is it that makes you unique and great relative to that target audience. And, typically when I ask, it's like, well, you get to talk to more senior people, you get better customer service, we're data driven. They're kind of generic answers that everyone says to me.
Right.
And so, I always follow up. I call it the second question test is, that's great. What makes your senior people better than the other agency that says you get to talk to more senior people? Or what is it about your customer service that makes it better than the other person? And so this is where budgeting comes into play, is you have to identify your target audience, the services that go along with it, your unique point of view, which is the hardest part, but then you have to budget to make your unique point of view real. And let me just give you a quick example. I'll use Rise. Rise's vision was to be the leaders in leveraging data to help brands make smarter marketing decisions. That is a lot of extra words to say that we are data-driven. Now, when someone says, great, how are you more data-driven than everyone else? I have 2 answers for that. So the first is, in order to get a job at Rise, before you're even allowed to interview, you have to take an analytics exam, and it has a 22% pass rate. So what we're doing is we're looking for the most analytical person. And I always explain, I don't know if our people are the smartest, but they are by far the most analytical. The second answer that I would give is that when you hear data-driven, data is a broad term. There's media data, customer data, consumer data, pricing data, inventory data, competitive data, et cetera. We focused on being the best at media data. We spent over 8 figures. Rise today has over 50 people building out their own proprietary technology that takes all the media sources from social media, search, programmatic, marketplaces, and it's able to identify waste faster than anyone else can and redeploy that to positive ROI scalable areas. And so the point is that we came up with our vision, and then we budgeted every single year in an evergreen fashion to make that vision more real on a regular basis. Very similar, I talked to you about CPR, cash, profit, and revenue.
Yep.
We are investing, we have about 10 full-time people dedicated to our product to making CPR for agencies greater. And so the idea is that a year from now, the decisions that agencies will make will be greater than the decisions they make today using our platform. And 2 years from now, the decisions will be even better. And so that's what I...
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, so that was what I was just saying is, to me, that is the biggest thing that I find as a miss, is that being competent is no longer good enough.
Yeah.
You have to be confident, have a unique point of view, and budget to make it real.
I mean, it's interesting that this SaaS product is not just solving a problem, but it's actually almost training them to be more focused, and we actually what they're trying to deliver.
We provide a mastermind group along with the product to help people really guide and learn how to use it properly.
Yeah. I at the very end, we'll kind of circle back and just tell people where they can learn more about this. But I want to kind of shift to it's a hard left here. We're going to shift right into the rapid fire area because I really want to get to this. And I always love these questions and just first thing that comes to mind, just answer them just real quick off the cuff. So did you get along with your parents growing up?
Yes. Great relationship with them growing up. Still great relationship with them.
Do you have siblings?
Older brother.
Yeah, you did mention your brother that you have. What about pets?
We had cats growing up, and I was allergic to cats, so maybe that shows how much my parents loved me.
That's right. We're going to keep the cats. That's right. You just keep taking medicine. Children?
I have 3 daughters.
What time do you wake up on a normal day?
6:30.
What time do you go to bed on the average?
10:11.
Ideal vacation spot, money, no object.
Mountains, outdoors.
Anything with mountains. How does faith affect your business?
I'm not a religious person, so not much.
So this is the closing question. You're king for a day. What is one thing you would do to change the marketing space if you could?
I would help all these agencies get a point of view and make sure they're budgeting to make it real.
You have covered so much ground in this half hour or so that we've had to talk today. It's been one of the most intensely packed interviews I think I've ever done with Marketing Umbrella. So I'm very grateful for you joining us today. But what is there one thing that we haven't touched on that you'd like to just a quick note to close this out with, and just let people know where to find you online, where to find more about EngineBI?
Yeah, so I would say a couple things. One, have fun with it. You're going to struggle. You're going to lose clients. You're going to lose employees. You're going to win clients. You're going to win employees. But, enjoy the journey. Identify who you want to be. Are you looking for a lifestyle business, or you want to grow a big agency? And then the other part is, if you're going to go through this journey, make sure that you have goals and you budget against them. Those will be my big learning points. The best place is connect with me on LinkedIn. I post every day something about digital market or something about growing an agency. Mm-hmm. And so, that's the best way. You can also go to enginebi.net, which is our website. And I really enjoyed this, Kevin. This has been great.
Well, Jon, thank you again for just sharing your insights. And like I mentioned before, we just want to have, subject matter experts come on and share in the marketing space so we can help agency owners grow and scale their businesses. It's been another great episode. Jon, thanks. Have a great evening.
Same with you.
Thank you for tuning in to another great episode of the Marketing Umbrella Podcast, where we provide the information you need from successful leading marketers to build and grow your digital marketing agency. To learn more, go to umbrellaus.com.